Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. Also, you can find my work at MEC Sharks and at Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey, on my website, half-wallhockey.com, also on San Jose Hockey Now. This week, it is
The Sharks still haven't won a game.
Yeah, the Sharks, it's still winless. It's like they haven't even started this season.
No, they haven't, yeah.
We
October doesn't count, obviously, so.
Yeah, the Sharks are officially more than 10% of the way through the season, and they do not have their first win, which kind of tells you that this season is already kind of written off. We're going to talk about a few things related to the Sharks this week. We have a lot of different news that happened. First off the bat, we've got a little bit of talk about Jumbo officially retiring. It has been rumored for a while. We're also going to talk about some of the roster moves, the scratches and injuries, and all sorts of different line combination things that the Sharks have tried to get
Thomas
their first win.
Bordeleau, I know a lot of people are upset that he got sent down.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Bordeleau and Peterson getting sent down. And then finally, our final topic, or another topic, is going to be the Sharks are bad. And we're going to talk about just how bad they've been. And if we can get to it, we're also going to have a short prospects update for everybody. Just what to look out for the future.
With some hope.
Yeah, we start off really bad, and then we end with some hope, just like the Sharks will do this season.
Hopefully, what the Sharks do over the next 5 years, I guess.
I think the only way to start this show is with the news of Joe Thornton, just because of how impactful Joe was as a San Jose Shark and how impactful he was to this franchise, and obviously with his absence from the ice being felt still today. Let's talk a little bit about Joe Thornton, his retirement, and where you think he goes next.
Yeah, Joe, in Joe Thornton fashion, went shirtless for his retirement announcement, which is just perfect for Joe. I would say that my guess, this is just a guess, pure guess, but if you are counting on jersey retirement this season, I would guess maybe not, just because you want to do these things right. And I don't think anything was planned before the season. I'm not exactly sure when Jumbo filed his papers, but I don't get the sense that that this was necessarily planned for, or he might have announced at the beginning of the season. And so that's one thing that I'll say off the top, that maybe next year, we know what's going to happen. He's going to get his jersey retired, but maybe next year, so you can do it right. Hopefully, you can do it in a game where they play Boston. That'll be cool. That'll be appropriate. And also have Marco Sturm, Brad Stewart, and of course Wayne Primo.
That's a good idea.
And Doug Wilson too, and Michael Cano. Anyway, though, and in terms of what's next for him, David Quinn actually suggested something interesting today in his press conference. That he had asked Jumbo if Jumbo wanted to come back during I don't know, they play golf during the summer, and Jumbo said no. We've always been under the presumption that Jumbo would come back for the right NHL role, like not on a PTO, not to start in the AHL and work his way up, but if a team will give him a solid role in the NHL. What Quinn said goes against that, so that was interesting. But also, the other part was that David said that he talked to Jumbo about joining the Sharks organization in official capacity finally, and Quinn said that Jumbo also said no to that too. And I think that comes maybe from Jumbo just kind of enjoying his life. And I think one interesting thing he said too is that he's retired from the NHL. And so I'm just kind of speculating here, but I do believe that Jumbo still loves to play, still loves to be out there. He obviously doesn't want to embarrass himself, right? And so he's not going to take a secondary. He's not going to go to the AHL or whatever, right? And he shouldn't. Yeah. But could we see him play somewhere just for fun a little bit? I wouldn't shock me, but I'm not sure.
Played in Switzerland, right? When the NHL had the lockout. I
In
think
a
he played in
lockout, yeah. I
Switzerland.
mean,
Yeah.
he's played in Switzerland a lot, and he goes every summer because his wife is from there. But this past summer, though, it was notable that instead of playing in Switzerland and getting himself ready for the NHL call somewhere, that he didn't play, and instead he was just caught coaching in Switzerland. You know, coaching his former
Mhm.
his former Davos team.
Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, he phrased that interestingly. I'm retired from the NHL, and he was basically telling everybody that we already knew it, but he just wanted to, I guess he probably got tired of people bothering him, and then
Sure.
just said,
Well, that
all right,
that's his
sure.
fault, though.
Yeah, yeah. He's
I
jumbo.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. He is jumbo, but I asked him point blank
Hmm.
after the Legends game before the Marlowe jersey retirement. I think I was the one to ask him, Joe, what are your plans now with your career or something like that?
Hmm.
And he said something like, "Well, I'm gonna play in a game, or I'm gonna go pick up my kids tomorrow. Go coach some hockey with them too, and yeah, and then I'm gonna go home."
Yeah,
And so he answered his question. He answered what his future plans were, but
for the next 24 hours. Um,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, I guess it's what like Demers said. You're like 95% of the way out and 5% in, and you don't want to say you're out
Maybe,
until
yeah,
you're
maybe
done,
that
kind of
that's
thing.
that's what it was. Yeah.
Maybe. Anyways, I love Jumbo. One of everybody's favorite sharks of all time. And he really was like this franchise for however long he was here, and it just goes to show every time that the Sharks are going 5 games with 3 goals total. That they miss Joe incredibly, or prime Joe Thornton incredibly.
They should time a Joe Thornton announcement for every 9-game losing streak, just to
Yeah,
distract the populace. So
exactly. We needed a little bit of just reminder of what the Sharks were. Having a little bit of melancholy feeling about the Sharks this week because it was not a good week.
well,
Anyways, let's
just
move on from
melancholy.
melancholy,
That
depression.
seems
I
that
wanted to
seems
use a big word. I wanted to use my
it
SAT
that
word.
seems like you're taking it pretty lightly, actually.
Yeah. Y- You
Like not
know,
full blown depression.
No, because there was no hope, and we knew it. So there was never like you never get that optimism. You can't get like the whole roller coaster effect of thinking they're going to be good and then bad. It's just kind of melancholy. It's just
I
really
thought
frustrating.
I thought that you thought, and I don't even know why I said it. I
Mm.
fully regret it, and I apologize. I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. I had a feeling that they might be a little more competitive, and they might be. I said 70 plus points.
It's
You liked
possible.
Barabanov and Duclair, so you had a little optimism,
Yeah,
and at least turning those two into.
yeah. It didn't work out for that. We're gonna keep talking a little bits about our predictions throughout the year, just little bits. Anyway,
No, we're not gonna bring it up ever again. I want to
no,
bury that episode.
until the next week, and we would
Yeah,
bring it up
exactly.
again. All right, so this week we also had I don't even know how many roster moves. It felt like once the Sharks started to unravel, once more injuries started to pile up, that it became a little bit of like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic
Sure.
in terms of who was going to play
I mean, what
where.
else are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, I mean you got to do something, and you have to like turn the line blender on. You press the button and hope the little blender's going to do something.
Joe Thornton isn't walking to the door.
But Thornton's not walking through the door. Neither is a very deep center group, which we talked about last
Yeah.
week, and just in terms of how depleted it was. But why don't we lead off with one center that is, or actually 2 centers that are going to be sent back down to the Barracuda, and Bordeleau and Peterson.
Well, Bordeleau, yeah, I'll start with Bordeleau because I know that that a lot of fans are upset that he got sent down, but you got to be honest with yourself. Bordeleau is not NHL ready. He doesn't look NHL ready. He was, in my estimation, clearly the Sharks' top 2 centers with Granlund and Couture out are Hurdle and Sturm.
Hmm.
And the Sharks finally conceded to that in their lines when they moved Sturm up with Eklund a couple of games ago. If you look at the Tampa Bay game, and I know the Tampa Bay game, everybody was bad, so it's a little unfair to pick on just Bordeleau, but he made a number of plays in that game are just not he was not just not good. Like William Eklund was not good in that game, but I don't know if William Eklund was like bad. Like there were like clear plays all over the place that he shouldn't have been making. Whereas Bordeleau, if you look at my game notes, and I don't want to pull all the gifts from that because I don't want to rip on the kid. He's still young. He's still immensely talented. I still think that it's very possible that he has a very bright future. So I hate to pick on younger players like that too hard, but if you look at a couple of the passes, neutral zone passes, when the Sharks actually did get rare times with possession, and moving it up the neutral zone, and his passes to advance his next pass, picked off, turnover the other way. I believe it was the Nick Paul goal. Of course, it made it maybe 5-0. So, but he leaves his man. He chases Ruda's man Stamkos on that play, and Ruda was still in the play. And these are just sort of basic NHL things, I guess, that just you can't do. And sure, you had a nice goal against Colorado with Cork, even the Tampa Bay game, and it's in my game notes. He made a couple of nice passes, right? And that's there, right? But you can't you can't have one awful egregious play for every one great play in the league. That's not an equation that works for anybody. Eric Carlson, obviously he's a great example of that, where there'll be that egregious play he makes, but he would have maybe like five amazing plays to balance that out. But the one for one thing doesn't work though for anybody, not for Eric Carlson, not for Ryan Merkley, right? Similar kind of example. And so Bordeleau is clearly not ready. You're doing him, I think, a disservice. It's keeping him in the NHL, where he's going to get roasted on a nightly basis by centers that are faster, stronger, and just more professional at this point than he is, more experienced than he is. And so it's kind of gone the way. Unfortunately, I had hopes he had some couple of flashes in the preseason, right? But it's just preseason, right? But this is the reason why I predicted that the Sharks would, if Couture started the season on IR, that they would start with Ryan Carpenter instead of Bordeleau, exactly for this reason. Because Ryan Carpenter doesn't have Bordeleau's ceiling, but Ryan Carpenter is a pro. And Ryan Carpenter is a competent fourth line center that doesn't hurt you, usually. And that's basically kind of what you're looking for at your really at any of your positions or any of your roster spots, right? You're looking for a guy that obviously doesn't hurt you, right? But also too can help you beyond that. So he fulfills the first bar, which is he doesn't hurt you, and the second bar is that he can help you. So Bordeleau was hurting the Sharks, and he wasn't helping enough, again, on the balance to make up for the ways that he was hurting the team. And I don't want to single just him out, but he is the one that was sent down, and he is the one that really does need that time to develop. I think he will benefit if he comes to the Barracuda with the right attitude and works on the things that unfortunately have sort of plagued him from his very first Sharks game a couple of years ago. Just the puck management. I wrote about that 2 years ago. All the things he was doing well 2 years ago, all the flashes, the oohs and ahs, right? Just careless with the puck in all the wrong places, and that still is happening, and that can't happen at NHL. You can't just give possession give counterattacks like that, which those turnovers often do. On Peterson, I don't want to just talk just about Bordeleau. On Peterson, I think Peterson is a better winger than center. I think we saw that last year. Granted, Peterson had the benefit of playing with Hurdle, and Hurdle, I think, it has been underrated we've talked about this, underrated over the years, in just terms of how he makes his teammates better. And I think he made Peterson better. And so Peterson as a centerman on a line with two younger players like Zetterlund and Eklund, who I have had good seasons, but he's not a guy that's sort of carrying the mail in any sort of way. And another, I guess, a point toward Peterson as a center, I think, and I know faceoffs aren't that important, but I think Peterson had a 32% face-off winning percentage in his
Mhm.
time with the Sharks. Now
Yeah.
30, yeah, you can stomach like a 40, a 45, right? I think Couture has been like at a 48, 49 for his career, right? Something like that, right?
Mhm.
You don't need
Yeah,
to be a 60% Patrice Bergeron face-off winner to be
sure,
a
sure.
qualified center in this league, but 30% is pretty bad. And that's basically just giving the puck to the opposition at the drop of every puck. And I think the same Peterson problems that made me sort of concerned about his game that I've talked a lot about. Just not quite physical around. He's a finesse player, but that's fine. But if you're that finesse player, even like Bordeleau, right? If you're that finesse player, or like Merkley or like Carlson, right? If you're that finesse player, then you better make that number of great plays per game versus the number of soft or egregious mistake kind of plays, right? And again, Eric Carlson is the prime example of this, where the balance is this way for the good and there's this for the bad, right? But
Sure.
for Peterson, for Merkley, for Bordeleau, it's kind of like this.
Yeah. That's it doesn't really actively help your team. And I honestly, most of the time, I don't think Peterson is as egregious of like the turnovers as
Sure.
some as
No, I agree.
Bordeleau is.
Yeah.
I think Peterson's most of the time just kind of fades into the background and
Mhm.
doesn't really stand out, much in the either direction unless he is, getting beat or just not being physical enough. But
Or
Bordeleau, you're
he'll
right.
make a great pass here and there. He
Hmm.
did a lot more last season, but every once in a while he would make a great play here and there. So I don't want to take that day away from him. He is still capable in small areas of those subtle skill plays that he
Yeah.
did more with Hurdle, but he did that here too at time to time.
Bordeleau, the whole puck management thing that happened last year throughout the AHL too. It's
Mm.
that the problem is sending him to the AHL. The Barracuda kind of play like that. Like they play a very poor puck management style. They don't play with enough like puck possession to actually like to play that kind of game. So he gives the puck away a lot in that level too. So I really wonder. I think he just needs to be coached in terms of when he needs to stop trying to make that play that's not going to happen. I think he's trying to stand out, and like some credit to him for just trying to make things happen that
Mhm.
he thinks that he might be able to do at this level, but it didn't work. And he does need more time in the AHL. He'll join a team that needs some help offensively, and hopefully he will develop a little bit more of a puck possessive style that isn't so risky, basically.
I feel
Um,
like he has
yeah.
been told,
Hmm.
and I think he's also been told by sort of how late he got called up last year, being moved to wing. So those are also messages too, and
Hmm.
so he's got to get that out of his game if he wants to make an NHL impact. He is not a good enough player that he can again, play the way he does. Maybe on an awful team that doesn't care if he's
Hmm.
leaking chances. He can be a 20-goal scorer, but not on any sort of team that fancies itself to be a good team.
Yep.
So he's gotta fix stuff that unfortunately was there in his game when he first played for the Sharks in 2021-22.
Yeah, I suspect he'll go down to the Barracuda, and he'll probably get a late call up, I imagine, sometime in the end of the season, and we'll see again if it's going to be the same kind of thing.
I hope it's better than that because he is talented enough. I
Hmm.
made that clear in my thoughts about him that if he hits his skill, his ceiling is higher than the Gushins and the Robins and you name it. Short of Eklund and Smith among the forwards in terms
Hmm.
of pure offensive productivity. If they all, not that they all will hit, but if they all were to hit, yeah, I can see Bordeaux producing as much as a Beasted, as some of these other guys that are ahead of him in their prospect ranks. But the problem, though, with Bordeleau is that, not to say his game hasn't grown at all, but it's been a little too, again, the same problem
Hmm.
of a couple of years ago, right? And
Yeah, and I guess the
yeah,
fans will make the argument that something like the Sharks are bad anyway. Why don't they just have Bordelot run around and do whatever he wants, even if they're letting up like 6 goals a game? But I don't think that's ever been David Quinn's like style of
well,
coaching.
that's clearly
And
what Guerrero said he's not
yeah,
planning to do too, right?
Yeah, so I don't. That's like kind of the argument. That's the end of the argument there. So some fans will still bring it up though, like that. He should be up there just whipping around pucks and trying to develop. But if he starts to develop with those patterns, he's never going to make an NHL roster that actually has any winning aspirations. So what's the point?
That's the point. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you just throw him out there and let him exercise his bad habits all over the ice,
Yep.
you make a player that's full of bad habits, and also too you influence other players. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but I was a teacher in my 20s, and the way I always approach things, and I think a locker room is not that different. But you walk into a locker room, you walk into a classroom, right? There are, say, 20 students, there are 20 players, right? There are 5
Mhm.
guys who are going to be your teacher's pets, your coach's darlings, right?
Sure.
Guys like, I don't know, a Kunin, a Eklund, guys who do everything that the coach wants, right?
Mhm.
There's going to be 5 guys that don't, or are more trending more to like, yeah, I'm gonna do it my way. Guys like Bordeleau, maybe guys like Hoffman or something like that, right? Guys
LeBanc
used to
probably. Yeah.
LeBanc to some degree, right? And
Mhm.
there's those 10 guys in between. And so who is going to have the run of the locker room, of the classroom, of the on the ice product and what they put out there?
Mhm.
And that's what Quinn and any coach, any GM has some control over. You want to put more of the better. I mean, it's the same thing we talked about. You want to put better examples around them, and you also too you want to reward better behaviors for younger players. As much as you people say, "Oh, look at this, that Kunin's not scoring, Kunin's not doing this or that," right? But how many times can you say that Kunin was just doing things that just you can't do at NHL level? A couple bad penalties here and there, but Kunin's a pretty responsible player. And we saw
Mhm.
that today in the Washington game, right? Just a lot of little things that he does that if he's not scoring, you can still throw him
Yeah.
out there and he's still helping you. He may not be helping you as much as people want, as much as his contract suggests, as much as
Mm.
getting you to
I
play
think
with
Eklund would
Granlund
have. I
Eklund.
think Eklund would have like 7 assists if Kunin could just like hit the net.
Maybe not 7. I don't want to. I don't want to do Luke that way,
Yeah,
but at
I
least
know.
maybe 3 or something like that.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
got to play with
Three or
Timo
four.
Meyer, for example, right?
Mm.
That'd be maybe 3 goals right there, 3 assists
Yeah.
on Williams' ledger. But again, though, also too, who are you going to put there? I mean, who
Mhm.
else is clearly, if you're going to try to get the best out of Duclair with Hurdle, right? Zetterlund has earned a spot up there, but also too, look, if you put Zetterlund in Kunin's spot, Zetterlund's not any more proven a finisher than Kunin.
Yeah, that's true.
There's kind of nobody clearly who should be there. You can put LeBanc there. LeBanc's a better finisher, but LeBanc obviously has shortcomings in other areas. You can put Hoffman there. Hoffman is clearly a better finisher, but Hoffman's game may not be quite what it was 5 years ago. And also, too, he has his shortcomings too. So, I've mentioned, yeah, at some point, Cunan's got to bury a bit and bury the passes. I know he scored today, but he's got to bury an actual pass from
Mhm.
William Eklund. But it's
But you
not
have
as
to
if
also give him credit for being in those positions to receive those
that's what I
passes too.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. I not that I'm in love with Kunin's game, but there's also something just to be said about an NHL rounded game. And you're kind of finding out now who can at least stay on the ice to not get the Sharks embarrassed. But that's kind of it.
That's the
Like they
bar, right?
that's the bar is
To
can
be
you be a
watchable
fourth
because that
line.
Tampa Bay game was unwatchable.
Yeah. Can you be a fourth line hockey player is kind of the bar right now in San Jose.
To be a
And
decent fourth line player, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean Ryan Carpenter, right? Like maybe not.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
may not even be a decent fourth line player, but he is a
He's
fourth
just
line player
he is
that
a fourth line player.
doesn't embarrass you out there. I mean, but yeah, let me ask you though, who would you put on? Let's say it's Granlund and Eklund. You and they
Mhm.
look good today together, right?
Sure.
Unless you put Eklund up with Hurdle, which there is an argument for.
Yeah.
But besides that argument, though, like who would you put next? Who's the clear winger that should be there instead of Kunin on the Sharks? And don't say
Man,
Gushin.
not Gushin. They would not work on that line. I don't know, maybe Zetterlund, but it's not like that's
Yeah,
even,
but Zetterlund is being promoted now, though. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
right? Yeah.
And
So
last year, it's like we ripped on him for having no goals in 20 games, and it's not like there's any other better finisher. Like
I mean, Zadina, right?
Hoffman,
I think everyone would say Zadina, Zadina,
Zadina,
Zadina, but
but
Zadina's game. Let's talk about Zadina because we haven't talked about him.
sure.
Zadina's game has also clear shortcomings too.
Yeah.
He is tenacious. He's on the puck. I like that about him, which is why he's still here instead of, say, a Bordeleau, right? Because Zadina is faster and stronger, and Zadina sticks his nose in there. I like that about him.
Hmm.
But Zadina still has a lot to refine in terms of defensive coverage, and I've seen that. I've noted it in my notes. There are reasons why he's not as obvious should be up there than Kunin. You can make an argument for it, as especially if Kunin keeps missing his grade A's. That maybe
Yeah.
put somebody that can bury a bit more up there and see what can happen. But it's not a landslide. They're not
Mm-hmm.
burying Timo Meyer on a third or fourth line.
Mm-hmm.
As Zadina's not that. So
Yeah. I I really and I think the Sharks just don't have enough top six forwards to make two lines that work even.
they don't
So
right now. Yeah.
they don't. And even when they get Couture back, it's like unless you put like Couture on like Hurdle's wing and then add somebody else like Zetterlund with them, then maybe you've got a competent top six line. But like even then, you're wasting out one of your center positions where the centers are dwindling away for the Sharks. So it's kind of a mess, and the line blender is just going to keep turning. I think with David Quinn.
Yeah, I
Um,
want to add to that too. I think the Sharks hoped that they would have more top six forwards, and I think we all did too. We
mhm.
saw big names like Duclair, like Hoffman, Barabanov
Yeah,
too. Even though Barabanov has been a Shark, productive in the recent past, things like that, right? And maybe
yeah,
those guys will find their level yet, but they
hmm,
haven't yet. Though I mean, Hoffman has been bad, I think.
yeah,
Duclair hasn't been much better.
hmm,
And I would say too, in Duclair's instance, Duclair's had a benefit of playing almost exclusively with Hurdle. Hoffman's been moved down a bit, so you can make an argument that Duclair's maybe been worse in some ways because Duclair's played with the Sharks' only legitimate top six center up to Granlund's
yeah.
return
I think
today.
Duclair looks a little better because he hustles a little bit more than than
Yeah,
Hoffman
well,
does,
he's
and he's a little
faster. I mean,
faster.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so he
So yeah,
looks better, but is he
sure.
really performing better? Not
Not
really.
really. Not
He
not
can't
not
finish
statistically, not in
chances.
terms of
Yeah,
chances so much, right?
yeah.
And
I think we're only talking
Barabanov,
about the offense. We're not even talking about the defense.
right. That's true.
Jeez.
That's true, yeah.
And it's not like the defense is horrible most nights, but it's also just so vanilla that it feels like it's painful. Like the amount of like skill plays that happen from a defender can be counted on like one hand in a game. Like the amount of plays that are not just like hold the puck, wait for a first pass, and that's it. Like that's the extent of the breakout for the Sharks. Nobody can skate out of the zone. I feel like from the defensive side. I'm being a little over dramatic, but it feels like that. And we all kind of knew looking at this defense that it was going to be bad. But it really, I don't know if anyone's really stuck out to me um, on the defensive side. I mean, I still think Ferraro's doing okay, and I expected
He can skate it out at least.
he gets skated out. Yeah,
Yeah,
he and
Knizhov and Emerson too have had
yeah, and I've
a little
liked
bit of
Emberson.
jump,
I
yeah.
liked him tonight. I think there was one play in particular that was like he got fumbled behind the net, and he should have like passed it before he held onto it for too long. But other than that, I thought his game was actually
He
pretty
was a
solid
big part
tonight.
of the Kunin goal besides the assist, but it was his rush, his read up
Yeah.
that gave the Sharks a clear entry. And that's what you want to see when you don't have the natural offensive talent, right? You have to play as a team. And
Hmm.
that was Emerson doing that. A clear read, clear lane where it's not going to go the other way, right? Unless he really messes up somebody, really fumbles it there in a weird way. And so clear entry, and then the Sharks forwards kind of did the rest in terms of forecheck, and Eklund was in on that, and
Yep.
it leads to just a kind of a ugly, grimy kind of goal. I want to add too, and I would be a bit more optimistic about this if this wasn't game 9. I'm talking about the Washington game today. If it
Hmm.
wasn't if this was game 1, um and against a better opponent, I would
Sure.
be actually pretty optimistic about what we saw from the Sharks in terms of the breakout. I actually asked a lot of questions of that in the post game, and I'll try to write a little bit about it. But and I think Drew Remenda mentioned it too on the broadcast. If you want to look back on that in the first period, but the Sharks support seemed much just more on time. Guys were helping each other out. Just one play, for example, Giovanni Smith was pressured in the defensive zone corner on the breakout. And instead of being forced to whip a long pass or just to dump it out, which we've seen the Sharks do so much this year, just glassing out, right? Jan Ruda was right there on time to receive a short, 12-foot pass on a very short pass from Smith. And because Washington's forecheck was concentrated on Smith and they were behind the play a little bit, Ruda, who's not the swiftest of foot, had an easy exit out. And that's teamwork. And that's what the Sharks, I think, are capable of doing better. Not, making the playoffs better, but definitely better than 0-8-1 better. And so we saw some of that today, more so than I've seen in any other game. I actually like the Sharks breakout today, which I can't say I've liked in any other game. I like the Sharks forecheck today. I'm not saying it was outstanding, and the chances, the shot attempts, 5-on-5, I think they were all pretty even. But I think that if we can pretend the first 8 games didn't happen, which we can't, if we were to.
The season doesn't matter. Let's just do whatever we want.
But if this was the first game of the season, this Washington game, I would actually feel okay about this Sharks team, because that's a Sharks team that looked competitive and really could have won today, with Granlund finishing a couple chances, or Kunin obviously, or Hurdle had a couple good chances there. So if, again, this is one good game out of 9. I don't really think, even though the Sharks have played better game, not all games have been Tampa Bay bad. Like the Boston game was a little better than bad, but it was more like on an okay side, just for example, right? The Florida game was more, it's okay. So maybe the last Carolina game too. But this was the first game, and granted, again, the opponent was the weakest of the first few teams, the first 9 games of the season. But
100%.
But this was the first game where I would say the Sharks were good for 60 minutes.
There, I guess, is a good way.
There, yeah, that's right there, yeah.
Yeah, they were there. We got a goal, but which is crazy. No, they're missing a lot in a lot of places. I did like Blackwood again. He's had a good start to the season. I think that's an interesting bright spot, that the goaltending has been good. Like, not just like I don't want to say good. We'll say like decent, above expected average.
Sure. And Kakanen's been decent too.
Yeah. So I think that's a bright spot. I think Blackwood looks confident, which is interesting, because he faces a lot of shots, and I do wonder if it's more of like he's that kind of goaltender that needs a lot of shots.
Yeah, sometimes guys like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like rhythm goaltenders kind of thing. And because he did not look confident in New Jersey a lot of times. So I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world that our goaltending is good, but it's bad that our goaltending is decent and we're still 0-8-1. It's bad. It's like, if the goaltending falls
that
off
tells you a lot about a team, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're done. So what else about the roster happened this week that we want to touch on? We touched on Emberson joining the lineup, Bordeleau, Peterson getting sent down. Granlund returned tonight. How did you think Granlund looked?
He looked good. He looked like he did in a couple of the preseason, or the one preseason game he was in, the LA game in Salt Lake. He looked like an impact player. Once again, preseason, right? But it's kind of levels, right? Like, if a player is just good in preseason, then that means, okay, in NHL, maybe he's just okay or bad.
Sure.
If a player looks great in preseason, then maybe he's good in the NHL. And so that's what Granlund looked like to me in that one preseason game. And then obviously the Vegas game, again, remind people that he says he got hurt in the second shift of that game. So whatever you saw the rest of the game wasn't what he would say was anything close to who he is as a player. And we did see some of that, I think, tonight. Looked healthy-ish out there, was hunting pucks. I clipped one play with him and Eklund. They were both they were both badgering Nicklas Backstrom, who looks a little rough out there, I had to say, but they took the puck from him, and then Granlund very smartly didn't just crash the net. He kind of laid in the weeds and
Yeah,
waited,
that was a
stayed
good
open, right?
play.
That was just art from both of those
Yeah.
guys, hustle and artistry.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think that I think he looked very, very good.
Yeah, I think he had one turnover that was like right at the blue line, come like
Mhm.
as a breakout. That was pretty rough, but it was more of like he just fumbled the puck and it basically just cost a lot of zone time for the Sharks.
Sure.
Nothing bad happened to it, but it just that was the only bad play. Other than that, it was seemed like he was some much needed skill was injected into the
Yep.
lineup with him. So
But
and I did
also forecheck
mm-hmm,
too, right? All other
forecheck,
elements,
yeah.
good defensively, responsible defensively. Um, yeah.
So
If go ahead.
I'm not gonna hate it. Be happy that there's somebody that can like match Eklund,
Be
you know, in
competent.
terms of yeah, match Eklund's skill like a little bit and can stay on the ice. Not that Eklund's like, you know, he's still establishing himself as a
Sure.
top six, top nine NHL player, but yeah, I did enjoy his return. Yeah, the Capitals also. I watched some Capitals games as well in my spare time. The whole Backstrom thing. That's they're Nick's. He's really done.
Yeah.
And they started him
Okay.
up in like the first top six to start the year, and it's just like now I think he's down to the third line.
Ooh. Okay.
Um, and they put Strome up, and Strome has looked way better than the he was down in the third line to begin the year, and now he's up on the first line with Ovi and Wilson, and yeah, it's I think it's done for Nicholas Backstrom. The problem is he's got like 2 more years on his contract at like $9 million or something like that. So anyway, short aside about the Capitals, but maybe they're not as bad as originally because they just had their lineup kind of really bad to start the year. So
Mm. Well, I don't want to count a guy out who's had such a great career, but
for
yeah,
sure.
he looked definitely tonight. He looked like a shadow of himself. A couple other guys to spotlight on the roster though.
Hmm.
Before we move on, I think. Well, first, actually, I want to go back to Blackwood really fast. That
Sure.
if Blackwood and Kakinen or can keep up this play, if the one thing the Sharks get out of the season is that they have figured out the answer in goal. For the possibly next couple of years here, wouldn't that be considering the last 5 years of
Hmm.
goaltending, that would be pretty tremendous. And so let's hope that can happen.
Hmm.
But then a couple of players more to spotlight. Fabian Zetterlund. Once again tonight, I like his game. He obviously doesn't belong on the first line, and so I think
Sure.
eventually he needs to be moved off of it just for his own betterment. I mean, it's asking a lot out of him, but he continues to just play a direct bowling ball style forecheck, strong of body. One great play that I highlighted in third period. Ovechkin got the puck up high, 5-on-5, and Zetterlund bullied Ovechkin and the puck out of the zone, and
The
that's
Swedish
what Zetterlund.
meatball.
Yeah,
The
that's
Swedish
great. Yeah,
meatball.
Zetterlund can do that. At least that's what I was told before in New Jersey, and he didn't show that last year with the Sharks, but he's showing it now. So I think that he hasn't looked awful on the first line, which is good. He hasn't looked like totally out of his depth, but I think eventually though he's better suited for your third line maybe. But I have liked his play consistently this year. And then besides that, have I liked anybody else this year?
Me,
Eeny,
uh,
meeny, miny, no.
no. Not really. Let's also we should mention that Barabanov is injured as well.
Oh, that's a big
The
one, yeah.
yeah, what's the time frame on his injury?
What's funny actually? No one has asked since Quinn said that it was week to week and he was going to get checked out. So actually,
Yeah,
I think there's been so many other injuries and focus on losing streak and Jumbo retiring that none of
yeah,
us did our job and asked Quinn for exact timeline on it. But
yeah,
if it is week to week as is really reported, that's not a bad thing. Instead of month to month at least. And so hopefully it is
sure,
closer to week, just for obviously for Barabanov, because this is a big season for him as a UFA. But even the Sharks, right? I know everybody's about the tank, but you still want to be competitive. You don't want to be embarrassed out there. You don't want, you want guys for other guys to play with, like William Eklund, when he's to play with somebody good. You want a Hurdle to have guys to play with, and so you want to be competitive, right? You want to have the worst
Yeah.
record in the league, but you also want to be competitive at the same time. And the Sharks are trying to get to that. They have the worst record in the league. They haven't been competitive, except for really tonight, in my mind, at least in terms of
Yeah.
the under the hood stuff, scoring chances, puck battles, stuff like that. They've been pretty behind in, I think, most of their games, if not all of them. But anyway, so hopefully Alex comes back, and he hasn't been good to start the season.
No, he wasn't.
But hopefully
Yeah,
he
he
comes
was
back.
0 points in 6 games for him
Yep.
before the injury. Hopefully, I mean, a little time off, and hopefully the finger is not too badly broken, and it's only a couple weeks out.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I guess the Sharks are hoping for. I mean, if you inject Granlund, Couture, and Barabanov into the top 6, maybe you can win a few games, and also maybe not score 3 goals in 5 games, which is just, I'm going to keep repeating it because, my God, I don't remember the last time the Sharks were this. I actually don't, let's talk about it, how bad the Sharks are. Because I don't remember how bad the Sharks are, probably because it's been so very long that they've been this bad. They now have tied for the worst start in their franchise history.
0-8-1, baby.
0-8-1, 30 years of Sharks history, and this is tied for the worst. They also have the worst goal differential in their season, or to start a season in franchise history as well. So, is this the worst Sharks team ever? Is a good question, I think, for an article. I didn't watch much Sharks hockey in 1993 and 1994, probably because I was very, very, very
well,
young.
1993, 94, you wanted to watch that team because that's a team that actually made the
or-
playoffs and upset the Red Wings. But
Was it 2 and 3 that was the worst one?
1991, 92, and 92, 93. Those were
93,
the Cow Palace teams.
Yeah, so I didn't watch a lot of Sharks back then. We could find somebody who did and just ask them if they think this is the worst Sharks team that they've ever seen. But the records are kind of piling up here for the start of the season. Anything else to add about that?
Well, I call me ever the optimist. I do try to look at you have to with this team. I think, and also when you're dealing with, and I naturally have a personality too. I think that I try to look at the optimistic side of things. I don't think that I think this team can be more like they were tonight, even though it's only one game of 9, and they may be the worst team in the league, but they should be a lot more competitive. So I don't think that they end up in that 11. The very first Sharks team, the expansion team, won 17 games. The second year team managed to be even worse. They won 11 games.
11, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think though they're going to be that bad. But I will say though that the first 8 games this year on the balance was I didn't. I mean, I was a kid back then, so I didn't watch those first. So I first 2 Sharks teams. So I'm not sure if I can talk so much about them, but I can just say like worst hockey. Someone asked me on Twitter, "Is this the worst hockey team you've ever watched, or something like that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I had to think about that because there's some pretty bad teams. The Coyotes teams of a couple of years ago, the Sabres when they were trying to tank for McDavid."
Yep.
But those are the teams that they are in a discussion with, though, unfortunately for them. And I don't think they end up as bad. That's my opinion. I think they do find a way to be at least competitive. Doesn't mean that they're going to have probably the worst record. They have a pretty good head start on that. So the worst record in the league. It'll be an upset. It'll be a triumph of coaching, of locker room dynamics. If they somehow manage to not have the worst record in the league based on the kind of pit that they've dug for themselves, how behind the 8 ball that they are. But I think that they are closer to the team we saw tonight that will stay close and lose games, as opposed to, like, say, the Tampa Bay team, that the Tampa Bay game when that was, like you said, that was unwatchable, and I had to be there, and I made a joke the next game that I think some people took the wrong way when I said something about, well, the Sharks' effort against the Carolina. At least the game is watchable tonight. And
Mhm.
everyone's like, "Oh, the bar is so low, it's low now." Yeah, the bar is low. That's the
Very
point of
low.
that. That's the point of that joke. The bar is low,
Mhm.
and it was so bad the night before that it was unwatchable, which I have maybe never said once or thought watching. Is I like my job, even if the team is bad. I still like watching watching hockey. And so I will say that this is the worst team I've covered, which isn't saying anything. Which just isn't saying that much because I haven't covered that many teams.
Sure.
First team again covered was the 2017-18 Golden Knights, and then the Sharks after that. And so this is the worst group of the 5 Sharks team, or the 4 Sharks teams that missed the playoffs, and then this one will likely be the 5th one. And so this, what I saw in the first 8 games, definitely was the worst, and they probably will end up the worst of all of them, just because they don't have the dynamic kind of players that can kind of overcome a shallow depth like Timo and Carlson, or can help
Yeah.
mask it a little bit. I mean to
And
say.
even with them, they had the least amount of goal or least amount of wins last year. So
Right, but
which
I
is
thought that
elite.
team, and we talked a lot about this
Yeah.
last year, that up to the trade deadline, that they could have been a 500 team if they had better goaltending, if they had locked
Yeah.
down a couple of leads that they had, right? In
Yep.
terms of just how the team was performing, the under the hood kind of micro stats, the team was average-ish actually,
Mhm.
and that's what I saw too. They were really competitive, really close on games. They just couldn't close out games. But anyway, though, so I think still that's where they end up. But again, I thought that they would be a little bit better, and they started off. They were embarrassingly bad on the whole the first 8 games of the season. So
Yeah.
they still have a lot of space to prove me wrong.
Yeah. And I think they probably are going to end up with a worse record. I admit also it only 25% chance to really even get like the first overall pick, even if you have the
Right.
worst overall record.
Right.
So
That's the thing to remind people, that you don't get
yeah,
more. Your lottery odds don't improve if you only win 5 games this year.
yeah, you can
So
win one less point, and
you
you
want
get
the
Connor
worst record?
McDavid or not Connor, you Connor Bedard instead
Yeah.
of yeah. But either way, I don't want people to like hinge all their hopes directly on a lottery win this early in the season, because you will just be depressed if you follow this team just hoping for them to lose. I think you should pick out like bright spots of players that are playing well, and are going to be a future part of the Sharks. And I think Eklund
Hmm.
is very clearly shown in this first couple weeks that I don't think he's ever going to play in the AHL again,
You
barring
shouldn't
some
probably, yeah. Yeah.
unforeseen circumstance. And that's a win. That's a positive step in the right direction for a prospect that needs to be a part of the Sharks'
I
future.
think the next bar for him though is he still has to produce though, and that's
He
going to
does.
be right. And so that hasn't been there. Yeah, you can blame Luke Kunin for it, but that's not all on Luke Kunin.
Yeah,
Eklund
yeah.
has had his chances too that he didn't bury.
Granlund could have
Um,
buried that one tonight too.
yeah,
I'm
but
just
again,
joking.
yeah, he's got to have some production to back it up. I think he will. I think you had a prediction of 40 points. I'm not off board that yet. I think that can happen. So
It can if he starts really getting. I mean, if they get Couture back and they start actually getting some like power play goals and stuff, it's
right.
possible. But he's still got to make it there. Um, regarding the uh, like 40 points, yeah, that does seem a little bit too far, but we'll see.
Right now.
Yeah, and we were all really hoping for a lot more, but that is a good parameter for where he should be at this point in his career. But I
And
am excited for his future based on this week, and I think that's a win for the Sharks.
yeah, like that's if you guys haven't known, I'm sure you guys have. The last 4 or 5 years, that's what been trying to do. Find the guys who would stick around and write about them and focus on them, because what else am I going to write about? I wrote my if people think that I'm letting it go, like I wrote my Mark Edward Vlasic decline piece 3 years ago.
Yeah,
during the COVID season, and all the sport logic stats. That article is there. That's already been written.
yeah,
Do I need to harp on more of that? I don't think so.
yeah,
He's here. The contract is a big reason why. What am I going to write about? And so So I try to focus on that. See multiple no Gregor articles over the years.
Yeah.
Some Rudy articles, stuff
How
like
is
that.
Noah Gregor doing? I haven't
I'm
checked.
actually not really sure.
He's in Toronto, but I haven't
Yeah.
checked and see. And he's in the lineup, and he has a contract and all that. But I don't know how he's doing
It's
stats
always
wise.
hilarious that he scored a preseason goal and then he scored an NHL goal, and they looked the same. They were just these flutter shots that beat a Montreal. I think it was Montreal both games. Maybe it's
Was
different
it?
goalies, but yeah.
Good for him.
Anyway, though, and so with the Sharks, yeah, I try to spend more time focusing on the guys who might have a chance to be around. And so that is right now, guys who have shown that kind of promise, and not to exclude guys that aren't here. They just may need more time in the Barracuda. But the
Hmm.
guys that have shown the most promise, Eklund, obviously, Zetterlund, we've talked about. Blackwood's a big one that people forget. He's a
Blackwood.
little bit older, obviously, but if you solve your goaltending and he can stay consistent over the years, then that's a huge,
Yeah.
huge
It buys you time to
block.
find
Yeah,
a new goaltender. Like that's like the way
sure.
the NHL works is like you kind of need one for a while until you can get a new one, or unless you have a superstar, obviously. But you need solid to be able to get
And
there to
maybe
be able
he's
to.
young enough. Maybe he will be your guy 5 years from now
Yeah.
when you're good. You never know. But you also want that good goaltending, because good goaltending helps when you play well.
Hmm.
Then you win games because your goaltending responds in kind, and your goaltending plays well too. I think Blackwood also benefited, even though he had to face a lot of chances, also on the power play. But it was a better defensive, better offensive effort. So he wasn't pelted like he was
Hmm.
against the Avalanche or the Hurricanes, that first Hurricanes game. And so that's a clear one. Maybe this is a big maybe right now, but you see promise in a guy that you liked, Emberson.
Yeah.
Um, Knizhov has been a little up and down, but there's been some good stuff. That's the stuff that I'm looking for. The guys who are going to stick, and the guys that you're looking to stick, like a Bordeleau, you do kind of pick at their games a little bit, because that's why I'm watching. I'm honestly not watching Hoffman that closely, not watching Duclair that closely. Um, when on shifts, I like to concentrate on one player usually, and it's usually
Hmm.
going to be one of the guys that I wonder, is this guy going to be around?
Yeah. And I think it's the way we got to do this whole season. So me, as the way that I picked my Sharks fandom, I focus a lot on Sharks prospects.
Mhm.
Probably right now because the Sharks are so bad. And I think we have a few actually good updates, and we can run through them a little bit quickly
Okay.
here, just to round out the episode. So, um, Sharks number 4 overall pick from last year, Will Smith. He had a little bit of a slow start to his college career. So he started his career at Boston College with his um, USNTT, USNTTB, NTDP lineup line mates,
NTDP.
NTDP line mates. Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault. They started a line together as well at Boston College, which is kind of cool. He through his first 2 games had 1 assist and like 1 shot on goal or something like that, or 2 shots on goal. And people were very, very concerned. They were worried that the amazing numbers that he put up last year in juniors was kind of like a flash in the pan, and that Will Smith's game was never going to translate to college. So I went back and I watched his second game, his LIU game,
Mhm.
which he had like 1 secondary assist. And I counted, and I went back and I just basically counted all of the chances that he created that I considered to be like high danger, or that were, had a good chance of actually creating something. And I counted
Mhm.
12 throughout the game, which
Wow.
is insane. And it was
So
not like
are you saying that Leonard and Pearl were Luke Kuning him?
maybe a little bit. There was literally so many chances where it was like backdoor plays. He puts it right on the stick, and the guy pushes it wide, like over and over. And he was that LIU game. Everybody kind of saw it and said 1 secondary assist against LIU, who is not a good hockey team. They're in the same division, or they're same like they're still Division 1 or whatever
Mhm.
the whole NCAA system is, but like they're not a good hockey team,
Sure.
and people kind of freaked out a little bit. But I think if he plays that game like 9 more times, he has 3 points instead of 1. And then he went through the next week and just tore it up.
Three points in each of the 9 games, right?
Well,
his 3 points in 9 games isn't that great.
Yeah, I meant like if he plays that like the way he played that
I just
game,
wanted
he
to
would
cover
have.
for you there.
Yeah. So, anyways, he did. The next 3 games he had 2 points, 2 points, and then 3 points. So he by the end of 10/26 Thursday, he was leading the NCAA in freshman points, which is miraculous. That's exactly what you want Will Smith to do. So then I went
Is
back
that
and watched his
miraculous or
previous.
expected though?
Miraculous in a turnaround sense because he started off pretty slow. That first game that he
Okay.
played was not good. Um,
Okay.
but it's expected and hopeful, I think is the way to put it. But I think there's some concerns basically because Will Smith plays a kind of a like a patient style of play and a little can look lackadaisical at times and a little his pace isn't so great a lot and he can look slow because he's just not really skating as hard as he could be. But he's very cerebral, and I honestly think that he looks slower than he actually is, just based off of his pace rather than his actual speed on the ice. So people can have a tendency to look at some game tape of him and say he's not doing anything out there, but you have to really like hone in on the details with him, and there's something there that's a little bit more of an it factor than even his line mates like Leonard and Perot. So
Well,
is
I wanted to bring up one pushback. We talked about it a little bit, just what you thought
yeah,
about it. JD Burke of Elite Prospects, he brought up this point about Smith, and just that he thought that Smith was not the driver of his line and maybe the third most impactful player of his line that he had seen. And granted, I think he mentioned that he hadn't watched all of Smith's
sure.
games, and this was also a couple days ago too. So, but
Mhm.
what did you think of that commentary?
Yeah, and he even admitted like later on comments like he hadn't watched the third period yet, and that third period of the game that he watched, Smith was like dynamite, and he's
Hmm.
like, maybe I wrote off a little. He wasn't really writing him off. He was just mentioning that what I'm mentioning, where it's like his
Sure.
pace is a little low. It doesn't look like he's doing a whole lot, but a when you like get to the finer details, he really is. He's like he anticipates plays so well in the offensive zone that like it looks like he's just a little behind the play, but he's really ahead, and that sounds
Hmm.
dumb, but I think he is. And Leonard is going to be an NHLer just based off of how he's got a really good shot, and he's
Hmm.
also just a very very good forechecker. So you could say that he's just the driving force of that line, but I really think it's Smith rather than the other two. And I don't have any evidence that Perot is a better player than Smith right now.
Okay. And I want
Perot's
to
fine.
also defend JD a little bit. Just that I
Mhm.
just look at this comment. It was a question from actually a guy that I recognize
Mhm.
liking my articles. I assume maybe he's listening. So
Sure.
Luigi Lombardi, which is a terrific name. I know it's can't be your real name, but if it is,
Maybe.
props to you because that's an awesome name.
I know that guy.
But on Twitter at not Pierre Petit. But he asked JD just what have you thought about Smith, and this was
Sure.
October 26th, so this was three days
Yeah.
ago, and so JD was kind of giving just off the cuff what I've seen so far in that game you mentioned, and
Yeah.
also didn't account for Smith's third period. So I want to make sure that people don't think
Yeah.
that JD is burying Smith there. He just was offering off the
And
cuff
even
about
more points to
player.
JD and I haven't watched this game yet, but the next game they played back-to-back nights. Apparently
Mhm.
Smith played very poorly. So I haven't watched it. I will let you
Okay.
know if he also did play very poorly. And
Okay.
it's a little bit of an up and down thing with Smith. I will say that. There's still definitely room to grow, but there's
Mhm.
something there that I think Sharks fans should be excited about.
Okay.
Because there's been a lot of highlights of like Leo Carlson's in the NHL, Connor Bedard's in the
Mm,
NHL, Adam Fantilli's in the NHL, and the
sure.
Sharks are ending up with Will Smith, who has one
Or
point
Matvey
in
Michkov is
two
scoring a
games.
point a game.
Yeah, or Matt Mitchkoff's tearing up the KHL.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we have to be patient with Smith, but there is something that is special about him. That's my little prospects updates for him.
Okay.
Um, I think that'll do it. I think we can just mention just the Smith as a prospect update of the week, and
Okay.
and maybe have a couple more on the future shows. But
Sure.
um, I think it's
Yeah,
time to get out
I'm
of there,
gonna
Sheng.
tease. I have an exciting. I'm gonna practice this again. I asked you earlier. Kajnikov.
Kashnikov. Yeah, let's talk about Kashnikov a
Update, but
little.
we can save that though. So
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure that the audience is waiting on bated breath for their update on Kajnikov.
the 2021 7th round pick Yevgeny Kashnikov for the Sharks. Anyway, I think, and this is my bold prediction, the Sharks will win their next game.
Well, based on how our bold predictions have going, that means that they will not win, and they will be they will be routed by Vancouver, and all the positivity that I'm trying to muster from from tonight's Washington game will all be lost.
That's true, and they're going to lose like 8-0. So
yes.
Anyway, no, I predict it. They're going to win their next game, and then next week you can tell me how wrong I was. All right, guys. I hope everybody has a good week. Enjoy some Sharks hockey.
Short episode. We'll get at it more in the coming weeks. So we have some guest ideas lined up, all that kind of stuff. So
great. See you guys.
See you guys.